You're listening to the ESP, the European Skeptics Podcast, an independent weekly show set out to bring you news, interesting topics, and interviews with people mostly from Europe, building bridges and breaking down language barriers to show the world how active and awesome the skeptical movement is in the region. This is episode 540. I'm your host, András Pinter, and joining me for the show is my co-host, Pontus Böckman. See ya!
Hejsan, András! Rise and shine, rise and shine. I guess it's pretty early where you are.
Yes, it is. I'm sitting in a hotel room in Kamloops in Canada, and it is 5:07 a.m. So, yeah.
All right.
Pretty freaking early.
Yep, I guess so. You said, what's the name of the city? I didn't catch that.
Kamloops.
Kamloops?
Kamloops. It's in British Columbia.
Oh, okay.
In the western part of Canada.
Yeah, sure, it's pretty lovely. I have never been there.
Well, some Canadians tend to ask us, what the hell are we here for? When I mention them that we are stopping in Kamloops, but we are spending the night so that we cut the long drive from the Rocky Mountains, from Jasper to Vancouver in two, instead of doing it in one run, which would be a nightmare. But,
Canada is huge.
It's freaking big, yeah. So...
Right. So I hate to ask you about the weather, but I guess you have some heat waves going on in North America as well, right? At the moment.
Yeah, we do, and unfortunately there are terrible wildfires as well. So much so that when I look out, I can actually see the haze, and you can even smell it. There's smoke in the air. So it's terrible.
Very much the same in Europe at the moment. Lots of fires going on. And so the heat wave here is continuing. According to some revised statistics from the European Mortality Monitor, which is backed by the European Centre of Disease Prevention and Control, the ECDC, and the World Health Organization, the number of excess deaths in Europe in June is around 10,000 people to the latest estimate. So we talked about thousands before, now it's over 10,000. At the same time, a study released on Monday by the Imperial College London, the Met Office, and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, they say that 2,700 people died in England and Wales as a result of the heat waves in May and June. So I guess those numbers overlap the 10,000 number, but there's still a lot of people. But what I wanted to highlight was something that I read about in The Guardian, because they made an analysis of the news flow about the heat wave. And that is that most articles about the heat in the UK did not mention anything about global heating or the climate. So 72% out of 2,500 articles failed to mention climate change in their reporting. And I see this as a continuation of climate change denial in the media. It's very bad. If we want something done about the climate crisis, we need to talk about it. We have previously mentioned the analysis by scientists from the World Weather Attribution, the WWA, that clearly established that the current heat wave could not be possible without anthropogenic global climate change. And we need to talk about it. Because if we don't talk about it, people think this is just, maybe it's El Nino. No, it's not El Nino yet, because there is probably a super El Nino coming, but it hasn't had time to affect the climate yet. It will come later this year or maybe next year. So, yeah, I know we talk about the heat waves a lot, but it is important and we can't be quiet about it.
That's true. And as skeptics, we can't. These are things that we see not being addressed enough. And when they are, they're just being willfully ignored sometimes. Yeah. And this has to be dealt with. Otherwise, we're screwed big time. Yeah. And it's not just being alarmist. It's being reasonable. It's about following the evidence.
Yeah, and being accurate in reporting. So I want to say that kudos to The Guardian for doing this analysis, because they could just have ignored it like everybody else. But they wanted to look into this, and they found that this is the case. Yeah. Anyway, no good.
Yeah, I wanted to mention one more thing about my presence in Canada at the moment.
Yeah?
Because, well, listeners of our show might know this, but when I'm here in Canada, and especially when I'm in the Rockies, in the Banff area, we tend to organize a short meetup with Adrienne Hill.
Oh, yeah.
Of the Skeptic Zone fame. Usually she records from Skookum Studios from Calgary.
Indeed.
But but when we meet, we tend to record something. Now, I have to admit that I didn't have the time to edit what I recorded with her. But the fun thing, first of all, we met up again with her and her husband, Greg. We had a lovely chat. Unfortunately, time was quite limiting, but we did an interesting thing. We recorded the same thing, the same conversation, and decided that we'll make an experiment out of it.
Uh-huh.
When we edit, both of us, whatever we have as a recording, let's see what the difference will be based on our preferences and all that as to what the outcome is of that recording.
Okay.
Yeah, where the emphasis will be in terms of presenting the same recording of the same conversation. So stay tuned for that. I'll have the time to do that for the next episode. So we will be releasing that.
Heads up for next week then.
Yeah. All right. What else in terms of housekeeping or any other important thing to mention before we move on to the regular stuff? Not much?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, then, now it's time for our favorite journey into the past. This week in Skeptical History. Let's travel back in time to the 17th century Florence to blow out the candles for a man who helped build the very foundations of modern experimental science. He was born on the 14th of July, 1610, and he happened to be the Grand Duke of Tuscany, Ferdinando II de' Medici. He ruled Tuscany, but his lasting legacy isn't in his politics. It's his passionate hands-on support of empirical truth and scientific skepticism, if you will. So he had his brother, Prince Leopoldo, who was a man of the church, actually, which was a very important part of this whole thing. So they co-founded something that is called the Accademia del Cimento, the Academy of Experiment, or the Ordeal, or the Trial. That happened in 1657, and it was basically the very first scientific society in Europe dedicated solely to testing the physical world. It's really interesting to look at the faces and the symbols behind this revolutionary Tuscan scientific circle. We have to mention that before the birth of this organization, if you wanted to understand the physical world, you didn't go much into experimentation. I mean, Galileo did a couple of decades earlier, but before him, it was not really the standard, the gold standard. It was like you didn't have to build a machine to measure anything. You just opened a translation of Aristotle's works and argued about it. But Ferdinando and Leopoldo and their academy completely flipped this whole thing. They gathered Galileo's disciples, brilliant minds like Vincenzo Viviani and Giovanni Alfonso Borelli, into the Palazzo Pitti in Florence with a singular, radical, well, somewhat skeptical mission. Trust nothing but direct measurable observation. And they chose an extraordinary motto, which you can see in the emblem banner of the organization that they provided as well. Provando e riprovando.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy to translate. It's often translated simply as trying and trying again. But the phrase actually is a reference to Dante's Divine Comedy and specifically its segment Paradiso, where it refers to proving and refuting stuff. Well, that would go very well with the skeptical approach as well. What it really meant was that a claim was only as good as its ability to withstand constant aggressive attempts to disprove it. And for disproving something, you had to do what? Experiment. And when you say provando e riprovando, it could also mean, and this is what the actual meaning is, testing and retesting. Okay, so it doesn't get any more skeptical than that, right?
It sounds very progressive for the time.
It was indeed. And it wasn't just a club, it was a laboratory that established several standards that we still rely on today to learn more about the world and actually to fight pseudoscience and bad data as well. So they applied something else that was important too, the neutrality of anonymity. First of all, they wanted to prevent egos and appeals to authority from corrupting their findings. And the Academy, for that purpose, published its work anonymously. So they published a lot, but they didn't want the names to be revealed. And there was another reason for that. Just think of the fact that it was the post-1633 Italy. That meant Galileo's condemnation was still a fresh, terrifying memory.
Yeah, the Pope could get after you if you were too radical in your findings.
Yeah. Or unleash his dogs, which was the
he seldom does his dirty work himself.
Yes. So there was one single official book of the Academy, which was Saggi di Naturali Esperienze, published in 1667, and it was credited to the collective for that person, not to individual scientists. Okay, but as I mentioned earlier, the Cimento pioneered the standardization of scientific instruments as well. I mean, physically, they provided their own equipment. They blew exquisite glass thermometers. They were filled with alcohol. They sealed them and distributed them so researchers across Europe were finally speaking the same temperature language. Well, not quite yet, but it was the first step towards that. They pioneered the use of control variables as well to test if a phenomenon was caused by their experimental setup or natural background noise. In order to determine that, they ran simultaneous identical trials with only one shifting variable. We take that for granted these days when it comes to scientific experiments, that if you have more than one variable, that will basically screw up your whole experiment. We know that. We use that as something completely obvious, but it wasn't before the Cimento. So what makes their skepticism so fascinating and a bit heartbreaking as well was their own political reality that I mentioned, with the shadow of Galileo's trial still lurking there. A tactical kind of skepticism was practiced as well. They deliberately avoided cosmological debates, learning from Galileo's trial.
Okay.
They didn't talk about whether the Earth went around the sun, because that was too big to discuss. Instead, they focused on safe physics like air pressure, the speed of sound, the freezing of water, the properties of vacuums that prior to their work was thought not to have been possible at all. They proved that smoke does not rise due to some Aristotelian nature, but rather because of air buoyancy. And they did it all using vacuum pumps to show, hand-operated vacuum pumps to show that in vacuum, smoke falls. By keeping their heads down and letting the cold, hard data do the talking and lead them wherever nature can lead, they managed to normalize experimental science and deeply hostile intellectual climate and normalize it, making it the gold standard in a way. And here's the sad part. The Accademia del Cimento lasted only 10 years.
Oh.
Right after publishing their sole grand work in 1667, it was disbanded. The reasons were mostly political. Prince Leopoldo was offered a cardinal's red hat by the Pope. Well, there was still some hubris going on, apparently. And the closing of the secular experimental academy was likely a quiet condition of his promotion. We don't know. But it could well have been. But the seed was definitely planted. The Saggi, the book, was translated across Europe. It directly inspired the Royal Society of London. Well, their own motto was nullius in verba, take nobody's word for it. So that's the same kind of principle, right? It's quite a bit of a sibling to provando e riprovando. So to finish off this week, I'd like to raise a glass of, well, whatever your favorite beverage is. I'm not going to drink, it's early in the morning, but perhaps chilled with ice. And, well, that's important because the freezing properties of that, the Florentines meticulously measured. So, well, to really finish this off, I raise my glass to Grand Duke Ferdinando II and his brother Leopoldo, and the brave glass-blowing skeptics of the Accademia del Cimento. And this is all on the occasion of the birthday of Grand Duke Ferdinando. who was born on the 14th of July, 1610.
Fascinating stuff. I did not know any of this. This was very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're ever in Florence and you want to go to Galileo Museum, which is a must, I mean, it's highly recommended to every skeptic out there. They have dedicated a room completely to the Accademia del Cimento. And you can see all the experimental stuff, the equipment that they used, all the glass vials, blown glass vials, amazing. Yeah, it's easy to spend hours there. I have, and it was all fascinating.
Yeah. Good.
All right, but that means that we are moving on to finding out what's been going on. Well, not in the distant past, but in the last couple of days or so.
Indeed. We handed the really wrong award to Tommy Robinson about a month ago, a little bit more, for his cynically exploitation of the tragic attack in Northern Ireland and for contributing to the terrible riots that followed there. Now we have some more news about Tommy, and it's not good. It's about the same thing and same time period. As the riots were happening, Tommy Robinson was actually not in the UK. While all of this was going on, he was in Russia, exchanging strategy and ideas with like-minded Russian right-wing extremists. And now we also know who paid for the trip. None other than Elon Musk. Through the Musk Foundation. Yeah, right. The Musk Foundation was established, well, I think 10 years ago, maybe some little more. The latest estimate I could find was that in 2024, it had a cumulative worth of about $14 billion US. It's probably not less now. And the facilitator and traveling companion to Robinson at the time was Errol Musk, which is Elon Musk's father. Robinson and Errol were recorded together in a video in Moscow at the same time as the riots were going on. And also critically at the same time, Russia was hosting another infamous person, the misogynistic influencer and alleged, I should say, rapist and trafficker of women, Andrew Tate, who posted footage of himself and his brother firing weapons and riding in a tank, apparently in company of the Russian military. So they were all there together. Whether they met up, I don't know, but it's probably not a coincidence. Now, listeners of this show will know of Professor Stephen Lewandowski. He's at the University of Bristol. We interviewed him back in episode 247. Go look that up if you want to. He is, of course, among other things, one of the drivers behind the Debunking Handbook. He has studied misinformation for many years and how much of a threat it is to society. So Stephen Lewandowski was interviewed by The Guardian about the links between Putin, Musk, Robinson and Tate. And he said that the visit by Robinson and Tate quite clearly has links to the hybrid misinformation war that Putin is waging against the West. Quote, part of that means that he, Putin, will recruit anyone to undermine Western democracy from within, whether that is Robinson, the Tates, or others involved in more conventional politics, he said. And then he continued, there is a pragmatic reason for the Russians to be making links like this. It is to their political advantage, end quote. So this is a horrible amalgamation of actors. We have Putin, who will do anything to create instability and conflict within the UK and into Europe and the world, really. And he's supporting and encouraging ultra-nationalistic provocateurs, and his efforts are clearly partly funded by self-appointed, quote, defender of free speech, end quote, Elon Musk, who just happens to be a close ally to the President of the United States, Donald Trump. So, I mean, if you want to build conspiracy theories here, I think here is fertile ground, let's put it that way. It's really a big... I mean, this is not just a theory. I mean, they are not actually, I think, sitting in the same room collaborating like this, but they are clearly having the same agenda and they help each other out when that suits them, no matter what the cost will be for democracy or the world at large. So Elon Musk and Robinson may be convinced or not that they are saving the world from some undefined woke threat. But in doing so and doing what they're doing, they're happily going Putin's errands for him. And this is really dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. And the motives, we don't know. But this is truly alarming because these people have terrible histories of basically ignoring human rights. And we could list all the things that can prove that, well, I'm not throwing around the word evil very easily, but these people, what they really represent can be called that sometimes. So it's really alarming to see that.
Indeed.
Well, let's talk about something that is, not equally alarming, but also something that it's worth discussing. And that is some medicinal practices or treatments that are very popular. And among them is osteopathy. There was a new assessment from the German IGeL Monitor, which is basically operated by the medical services of Germany. And they published an updated evaluation of osteopathy for unspecific low back pain. Just as in their 2018 review, the verdict remains, unclear. And the assessment, which was published on the 18th of June 2026, but it took me a while to come across it, so hence the 1 month delay in putting it into the news items. This assessment examined the best available evidence, including a high-quality systematic review and meta-analyses of 10 randomized control trials that were altogether involving 1,160 participants, as well as 2 more recent individual studies. So, even though a handful of these studies suggested that osteopathy might provide some symptom relief for people with chronic low back pain, unspecific chronic low back pain, it's important because that basically means that we don't necessarily know what the underlying causes are. So the overall quality of the evidence was judged to be quite low because of methodological weaknesses. So this is why meta-analyses and systematic reviews are important, because that is something that comes out when you make that analysis. And researchers also point to a likely publication bias, meaning that studies with positive results may be more likely to appear in the scientific literature than those with negative findings. And obviously, taken together, the available evidence should demonstrate a reliable or clinically meaningful therapeutic benefit, but it doesn't. So the 2 newer studies that are considered in the update reinforce this conclusion, actually. So on the safety side, the review found no confirmed evidence of harm. That is important. But on the other hand, adverse effects were poorly documented in the underlying studies, which means that the safety profile remains incomplete and, as a result, not well understood. So it's a very important part of this conclusion as well. If you try to put these findings into practical context, in Germany, osteopathy is offered as an individual health service, meaning patients generally pay for it themselves. A typical session costs between 80 and 150 euros, and several sessions are usually recommended by the practitioners, obviously. And statutory health insurance does not routinely cover osteopathy.
Good.
But some insurers provide voluntary subsidies. So in a way, there is a little bit of funding going on. The evaluation focuses on unspecific low back pain, as I said, and this basically accounts for roughly 80% of all low back pain cases. So in most cases, the physical cause is impossible to identify. But contributing factors could often include physical, psychological, and social influences, such as sedentary lifestyles, which is one of the obvious ones, stress or depression, and osteopathy as a complementary therapy, which is the most frequently applied approach, is based on the idea that manual manipulation can remove bodily blockages, so to speak, and they can stimulate the body's self-healing processes, but the scientific evidence supporting these claims remains weak. The IGeL Monitor that was behind this study not only monitors osteopathy, but lists 61 different medical practices, that different approaches of medical practices that are covered in the self-pay medical services group. And osteopathy is one of them for unspecific low back pain. And it is one of the 27 out of the 61 medical service types that are rated unclear. So almost half of these that are monitored by IGeL belongs to the unclear category, which is mind-blowing. Why would they even get the green light to even operate if they lack the scientific evidence? So no full positive rating, and yet they are popular and they are being practiced. Despite this popularity, osteopathy, as I mentioned, still lacks convincing evidence as a treatment for unspecific low back pain or others, but this was specifically focusing on that. So patients, considering it, should weigh the uncertain benefits against the personal cost and be aware that despite 8 years of additional research since 2018, the overall scientific assessment has not changed. No clear evidence that it works.
And there's no real plausibility either, because it's built on, it's commonly you say magical thinking, but it's just intuition. I think this might work, but there's no explanation as to why it should. So. And exactly. As of harm, of course, with all of these kinds of things is that, well, you can say maybe it's not harmful to go through the treatment. Well, it could be if you say no to something else that is evidence-based that you should have done instead, and you lose time and the financial harm, whether you get the insurance company to pay for it or not. All right. So speaking of medical treatments or treatments that may or may not work, I am going to continue my unofficial new segment from last week called Quackery Roundup. I don't know if I'm going to keep this up. It's just that it fitted today's agenda. So firstly, something that we might have touched upon before, testosterone supplementation. So the background is that overall, testosterone levels in men seem to have gone down over the last several decades. And that sounds worrying and should be taken seriously, of course. Could be a sign of a real problem. There is no real consensus of why this should be. Speculation is that it may be because of some environmental thing, such as exposure to so-called forever chemicals, or similar things like that. Or perhaps it's linked to change in lifestyle. Main suspect here is probably increased obesity. And people are getting bigger, and that changes the metabolism of the whole body. Some figures seem to point to testosterone levels reducing by as much as 50% since the 1970s or 1980s. This is concerning. Testosterone is vital for the body. It is important for a lot of things, such as muscle growth, the production of blood cells, and also it helps limit fat production. It is important for the function of the central nervous system and the brain, and studies have also shown that men with low testosterone levels have an increased risk of osteoporosis. Many men seem to be worried about its influence on sexual health, of course, and that link do exist. However, scientists say that the link isn't as strong as people may think it is. And of course, if you are worried that perhaps your testosterone levels are too low, it could be a good idea to have it checked out by a real doctor. However, the problem is that a lot of people do not do this. They just decide for themselves that they know that they need more testosterone. And then if we work at the people who do consult a doctor, we find a lot of the time that perceived problems with things like physical exhaustion or muscle and joint pain, it seldom correlates with low testosterone. People make the hasty assumption that it is the testosterone that you have to blame, when it could be a number of other things. But because of this focus on testosterone levels, the consumption of testosterone supplements and gels, and whatever way you now consume these substances, I don't know, they have increased by 300% since 2006. These numbers are from Sweden, but I think they're pretty representative for most of the world, or at least the Western world. And if you don't have testosterone deficiency, overdosing in those supplements could lead to too high levels, which is harmful. There is a balance that can be disrupted. high testosterone levels can lead to physical wear and tear of the body. Individuals with high levels are at increased risk of disease and mortality. Amar Osmancevic, a specialist physician from the University of Gothenburg, is warning people that self-prescription of testosterone may be both unnecessary and harmful. So beware of that. Don't just assume that you need more and more testosterone. Go get it checked out first by a real doctor. So that was the first one in my Quackery update here. About 1 in 7 couples have difficulty getting pregnant. Many seek help by in vitro fertilization, IVF. However, the chance of conceiving after IVF or with IVF is only about 30 to 40% per treatment cycle. So obviously this can be very disappointing and frustrating. Yeah. And many of us do have a strong desire to have children. So it could be very hurtful and a cause of a lot of pain if it doesn't happen, quote unquote. So some couples, since the IVF is not that reliable, some couples turn to private clinics for additional treatments known as add-ons. These includes, for example, acupuncture, so-called embryo glue, which was a new one for me. It's something to get the embryo to stick to the inside of uterus more, reliably, I guess. Uterine scraping and genetic testing of embryos, things like that. These methods are very expensive. They can cost thousands of euros as extra things. But according to a new study published in the journal The Lancet Obstetrics, Gynecology and Women's Health, the vast majority of adjunctive treatments have no effect on fertility. And this is the biggest review to date. It included an analysis of 85 previous studies to aggregate these results. And what they found was that the scientific evidence is often so limited or of so low quality that it is impossible to draw any conclusions at all. But since people are going to these private clinics and they are desperate to try anything, of course they pay a lot of money for these sort of add-ons for IVF, and I understand it, but it seems to be a waste of resources and money, unfortunately.
Oh, wow. And yeah, you could really make a segment out of this, I think.
We'll see how it develops.
We could list these weeks on end. Okay, but that brings us to the end of the news round, which means that we are about to find out who's been really wrong. Really, apart from these others that we just mentioned. Yeah.
So, okay, a little bit more light-hearted story for this week's award, although not without harm. The local newspaper in my area, well, I say local, they're probably around the 7th largest daily newspaper in Sweden. They have done some undercover investigation. It was pretty fun to read about. 2 reporters had noticed that there are a number of so-called pet whisperers around. People who claim to be able to talk to your cat or dog or, I guess, squirrel or whatever your pet is and tell you how they feel and what they want and, of course, how much they love you. So what they did was that they borrowed a dog that they didn't know, or the dog didn't know them, so it was just to be neutral. They temporarily renamed the dog. The real name of the dog was Puck, but they renamed him Winston. It's an older terrier kind of dog, a little bit hard of seeing and hearing because it was an old dog, but they borrowed this dog and they made appointments with 4 different dog whisperers who charged around 100 euros per hour for a consultation.
Okay, I wanna be a dog whisperer myself.
Yes, seems to be a good gig.
It's a good paying job.
They selected these 4 out of about 25 other whisperers that were within 1 to 2 hours by car. So this is quite a lot of them. There are plenty of these people around. Some of them also offer home visits, but also remote consultation. You just send them a picture of the pet.
So it's just a picture. You don't have to zoom in.
No,
it's not a Zoom call necessarily with the dog talking or barking or something.
No, just a picture. Just a picture. Some of them also offer other spiritual services, quote unquote, healing, past life regression, or healing conversations. I don't know even what that is.
But that is unrelated to the dogs.
Yes,
right?
with or the dog or with the human. They don't discriminate. So it was a good thing, I think, for this experiment, for the reporters not to know the dog beforehand, because then there's no risk of them accidentally revealing any facts to the pet whisperer in question. So what they did was they came up with a set of made-up questions that they said they wanted to have answers for from their quote-unquote dog. And here were the questions. The first one was, has he had a good life with his family? Why has he been so reserved around new people lately? And remember, these are made up, so it may not be true.
Yeah.
And then one very specific one. What exactly happened a year ago when Winston attacked a child in a public park? Remember, this is made up, but they made that up. Mm-hmm.
And that was obviously not spotted by either of the whisperers.
No, of course not.
That it was all fake.
They happily replied to all of this. So the procedure from these 4 different readers, or whatever you call them, were pretty much the same. They all sat quietly, taking notes with questions and supposed answers from the dog. It was quite a quiet conversation, as far as I can understand it. And then they presented the results to the owner. One of them used pictures rather than writing down questions and answers, but it was more or less the same thing. Shockingly, the answers were not at all the same. I won't go through all of this, but I want to specifically take the last question about the girl that supposedly was attacked in the park. One of these whisperers said that Winston was used to playfully chasing the ducks and the squirrels, and he got a little overexcited when he wanted to play with the girl. That was one reply. Another one said that since Winston's vision is not what it used to be, he mistook the girl for something else. The third one said that Winston felt threatened by the girl, who approached him very suddenly. And the fourth one said that Winston said, quote, now it's a quote from the dog here, "Oh, I thought she was scary, rowdy and unpleasant. I've never met a child like her before," end quote. So obviously very different answers. And all of them wrong, by the way, since that incident never happened.
Because it was,
let's not forget that. Yeah. So clearly all ridiculous and made up to the tune of €100 per hour. And as skeptics, we know that believing or encouraging others to believe in things that has no basis in reality is harmful in itself. In addition to that, we have the financial harm of paying for nonsense, a made-up service. So, therefore, all so-called pet whisperers, wherever they may operate, get this week's award for being really wrong.
And deservedly so.
Yeah,
it's really similar to like any kind of cold reading.
Yes.
It's basically you're fishing for something that is quite likely to be a valid scenario. Like the first version for the attacking of the girl. That you can easily imagine to happen, right? Mm-hmm. But it could not have, because it was all made up. But
at first I was surprised that they didn't ask the quote-unquote owner a lot of questions, because that's typically cold reading. You ask questions, and when you get a confirmation, you spin on that line of thinking and so on. They didn't do that, and I realized that they don't have to, because there is no verification. If you're cold reading a person, you want that person to give you feedback, because that person has to validate what you're saying. But in this case, they can make up whatever they want to, because it's the dog talking to them.
Yeah, but also this was an experimental setup. So in a normal live setup where a dog owner takes the dog to a dog whisperer, it's obviously with the presence of the owner. So there must be some cold reading techniques going on there being applied. So this is just ridiculous. And imagine that, being able to do that with a straight face and not bursting out laughing on every idiotic thing that you say.
Yeah, but I think some of these people actually believe that they're talking to the dog. You can't know. I'm sure some of them do not, and some don't. Because they're convinced themselves that, they're just fantasizing, right? But since nobody's contradicting them, after a while, you start to believe in your own bullshit. I think there are examples of that.
Yeah, but believing that I can speak to the dog when I cannot. I mean, I can speak to the dog, but the dog can speak to me. It's delusional.
Yeah.
It's
But you just close your eyes and you focus and you concentrate. What is the dog saying to me? And you start making things up. And you may believe that it is the dog. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's still bullshit. It's still really wrong.
Well, as a person living with a dog, I do occasionally have to remind myself that she's a dog. Because we anthropomorphize our dogs, our pets. We tend to think that we know what they think at a certain moment. And we don't. So it's like there are connections, but sometimes, and some experiments show that quite clearly, and some published scientific material will tell you that when you think that you express your love towards a dog and it really appreciates the it doesn't necessarily. So sometimes they're uncomfortable with the ways that we express our feelings towards them. And it's because we don't understand them.
Yeah.
So we have a connection, that's for sure. But we don't necessarily have that deep understanding of each other. And this is what these dog whisperers claim to have. And it's just the wrong assumption.
Yeah,
all right.
Indeed.
Thank you very much for that, Pontus.
Thank you.
And that means that we are about to conclude the show, but we cannot do that without a quote. I know that we use quotes from him all the time, but he just likes to speak. He just likes to talk about science a lot, and he makes a lot of sense when he does. So this is why we are featuring a quote on this week's episode from Professor Brian Cox.
Woo-hoo.
And the quote is, "The beauty of science is that it's a self-correcting process. You don't need to believe in it. You just need to be willing to test it. If you're wrong, that's okay. That's how you learn. The universe doesn't care about your ego. It only cares about what's true. And the closer we get to the truth, the more incredible everything becomes."
The wonder of science. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, there is one part of this that I don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
The universe doesn't care about what's true.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't care at all.
About anything.
No, it is not a conscious being.
Yeah, not that we know of, at least. But other than that, it's I think this is a cool one. Well, Professor Brian Cox tends to say interesting things. But with that, I have to announce that this is the end of this week's episode. So I'd like to thank you, Pontus.
Thanks a lot.
Many, many thanks to our listeners as well for tuning in. Please keep doing so. And until next week, goodbye.
Hej då!
Vislat. This has been your ESP experience. The show is produced and recorded by TheESP.eu. Join us again next time, but until then, please send your feedback and comments to info@TheESP.eu. We would also love to hear your ideas and suggestions regarding topics, and if you have any skeptical news from any European country, we're always eager to hear about them. If you have an upcoming local event or an organization to promote, please don't hesitate to let us know, as we are more than happy to help. All music in the program was written and performed by Keisha J. Gray and George Robb and is used with their permission. Please check out our webpage for show notes and archive material at theesp.eu. Follow us on Blue Sky at theesp.bsky.social. Like us on Facebook or support our work on patreon.com/theesp. And don't forget to spread the word by sharing our content with others.
I don't know how you can believe.
I think I'm messing this up. Can I restart?
Oh yeah, sure. I have plenty of tape to record on. Published in the journal The Lancet Obstetrics Gynecology. I know these words. What the fuck? The Lancet discriminate.
With or without you.
So,
the beauty of science is that it's a self-correcting process. Okay.